I wanted to start by saying that the topic of this forum is the client-centrism, client and the key role. From my point of view, this is very satisfactory because this is yet another industry conference of the financial industry where the client is at the center. This is a very good sign, and it means that the industry understands where the world is headed, and we need to reflect at this point, or reflect back on what the relation should be between financial institutions and the customers. And referring to the discussion yesterday, I think it's worth thinking about how this should be to the benefit of a long-term balanced relationship, and this is also our expectation as the supervisor. I am very happy about consumers represented on these panels. Artur was represented yesterday. The Consumer and Protection and Competition Protection Office. Again, this shows that the financial sector understands the trends, and this is a good sign. Of course, the industry of investment funds is an industry that's very customer-based because the profit of the industry depends on how well the customer is faring financially. And I remember 2002, before the capital gains tax was introduced, and then things changed, but also things tend to work the other way around, like after Lehman Brothers, assets melted and the reconstruction took a number of years. Similarly, the recent stage, there's that, recent history, but in recent years, the pandemic or the war in Ukraine, and interest rates, all this impacted the realities of the customer. And what's important for us is to draw conclusions, and these conclusions should be geared towards reflecting on how the industry can offer benefits to the customer, because these benefits, these advantages offered to the client will translate into revenues of the industry. So what's important is not to reverse this order. So first benefits for the customer, and in turn there will be benefits for the industry. Every crisis is a lesson for the financial market and for the supervisor as well. After Lehman Brothers, we knew we had to prepare for what happened in the first stage of the pandemic, where we saw certain acquisitions and sale of assets by clients, and we draw conclusions for that. Now, referring to this yesterday's discussion, I mean the information passed on to the client. Before 2022, we lived in a reality of stable low rates, which meant that debt funds could develop in a stable way, and they became very competitive. And as you remember, the names of these funds carried words like safety of the funds, capital protection, etc. Generally, stability and safety associations, while as a result of the changes in interest rates, these investments showed that there was no investment without risk, because even these safe ones, are prone to certain risks that, if materialized, translate into a drop in valuation. What does this mean? This means that clients have to be aware that every investment product carries a certain risk, and the level of this risk depends on what you invest in. What's also important is the investment perspective, the horizon in which customers invest. And I think that the industry is interested in building a long-term relationship with the customer, and this is why communication is so important. Losses in the long term can be made up if we are building something in the long term, and building this awareness on the part of the customer will minimize the risk of being disillusioned on the part of the customers. So information and transparent transfer of the information can support building this long-term relationship, particularly if we communicate about the risk in a clear way and how long-term differs from the short-term, that even if the customers lose in the short term, the losses can be made up in the long term, and this is very important for this relationship building exercise between institutions and the customers. Yesterday's morning panel, which I was on, was focused, among others, on this issue. That is, information duty and full transparent information. Is this enough for building this long-term stable relationship between financial institutions and the customers? And the strand of libertarian paternalism was raised, and I wanted to pick up on this. It was included in the material my colleagues prepared in the theses. But yesterday's debate allowed me for expanding this. If we're talking about financial institutions and the financial market, alongside provision of information, stress should be put on an adequate way of offering products so that they are adapted to the needs and capacities of the customer, and by this I mean the awareness of risk and the acceptance of that risk. And this leads me to the second area that I wanted to mention, and that my colleagues of my institution pointed me to. What I mean is the following. On the one hand, the investment funds are responsible for preparing the right set of information for the description to be transparent for the customer. And on the other hand, we have the process of sale by all kinds of distributors and all kinds of information and sales practices that are used by distributors. And what I want to be clear is that financial institutions, alongside the duty to provide information, to an ever larger extent are responsible for forming this product management in such a way that these products are really targeted at clients, at customers for whom they are really designed. I think we are at such a stage of the market that we need to understand that this risk and the duty to manage is on the part of the financial institution. That is, experience shows that providing information to the client, signing all kinds of declarations, reading the risk information, may not be enough, particularly in certain groups of customers. Of course, the case is that in the capital market, this may be different than in the case of products such as bank products, credit, loan products, satisfying basic needs, because one can imagine there an area where there is absolutely no room for any risk carried by the customer. But even in terms of investment products and capital market products, different clients have different capacities of risk acceptance. And the process of distribution should be so designed that the group that have no capacity, do not have the capacity to absorb a certain risk, these products should not be targeted to that group. I want this to be clear, and this process should be the risk of organizing this process in such a way is something that has to be understood. And the responsibility is on the part of the financial sector. And a general assumption that investing carries a certain level of risk is not enough, and it won't take away the responsibility for organizing the process of distribution, particularly since the market is the products are ever more diverse with different levels of risk, and the risk absorption possibilities, capacities are different in different clients. So going back to that libertarian paternalism, I'd say that we're going to be headed for a situation where certain groups of clients have to be protected against this risk. And I think this is true, taken into account yesterday's discussion and our general experience in the financial market and oversight. Translating this into investment funds and talking about the distribution system, I think it is becoming of key importance for TFIs to take the responsibility for risk, for products to be offered to customers for whom these products are adequate. Even though the purchase of the product may be started at the initiative of the client, and even if the declarations are signed, etc., still that might not be enough in the case of certain clients. Now, to buckle up, I'd say that our joint goal and mission should be to build an awareness such that customers realize that every investment carries a certain risk. This is something I've had the opportunity to talk at the forum of brokerage houses in Bukovina. We said that we need to build a certain culture of risk acceptance. That is, if we do not build a culture of risk acceptance, we cannot build a capital market, because the capital market is supposed to offer beyond average opportunities, returns, which means that the level of risk will be higher in this market. And yes, we should be building such a risk acceptance culture, but we need to put on top of that the fact that not every client is capable of accepting a certain risk, has a certain risk absorption capacity. I think that in the capital market there are areas in which the customer should be protected against accepting a certain risk that they are ready to accept. So, summarizing yesterday's discussion, general adequate analysis and assessment of risk from acceptance capacity is key, and aligning the kind of product with the needs of the client, and the responsibility for that is going to be on the part of the financial institutions, and this is not going to change. And the offering process, the distribution process has to be so organized that the products are really adapted to the economic possibilities of the customers, because if we don't pay attention to that, I think we are at a stage of the market development at which, it's not enough to say, yeah, the client accepts all the disclaimers. That's not enough anymore. So the general message is that we need to build a risk acceptance culture and adapt. We need to adjust we need to pick the right kind of product for the needs of the given customer, and bear in mind that certain groups of customers should not accept a certain level of risk, and unfortunately paying attention to that and assuring that will be the responsibility of the financial institution. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Małgorzata Rusewicz, for allowing me to refer to last year's formula, when I also had the pleasure to summarize the event. It's a wonderful opportunity to refer to the discussions that took place here for 2 days. Thank you very much, dear President. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. Thank you, and see you.